February 9, 1977. Youngstown's Campbell Works was already awake. Blast furnaces glowing, steam rising, the air tasting like sulfur and hot iron. At 6:47 a.m., one rifle crack cut through that industrial roar. By the time the day shift clocked in, 12 men had been marched into a maintenance shed and executed like inventory being written off, because a union vote got sold. And here's the part that destroys every workplace dispute explanation. This wasn't a fight or a riot or a heat-of-the-moment shooting. It was scheduled. It was orderly. It was personal. 12 workers, men who'd shared break rooms, overtime, wedding photos, and hospital bills, ended up on the same concrete floor because someone betrayed the only thing steelworkers had left: each other. Frank Marino woke at 5:47 a.m. the way he always did. Same kitchen light, same cheap coffee, same cigarettes on the porch, no matter how hard the Ohio winter tried to freeze his lungs. The mill had trained him to live by routine. You did the same actions every day because the mill didn't forgive mistakes. One wrong move, 1 second of distraction, and you didn't go home. Frank had survived long enough to become important. Not management important, union important. The kind of important that makes people knock on your door when they don't know who else to trust. Frank was shop steward for the local. He handled grievances. He defended guys who got written up for safety violations that weren't theirs. He argued with supervisors who treated men like replaceable parts. He believed in the union the way some men believe in church, because without it, the company had the power of life and death. And in a steel town, life and death wasn't metaphor. It was the difference between heat in your house and eviction, between insulin and a funeral. That winter, the company announced cuts, pay down, benefits reduced, pension contributions up. The kind of numbers that look small on a memo but destroy families in the real world. Men did the math in their heads while they worked. A few dollars less an hour meant groceries disappearing first, then car payments, then the gas bill, then the house. The union hall filled with anger, real anger, the kind that comes from being trapped. So a strike vote was called, and workers showed up because it was the only lever they had. The vote happened on February 7th. Ballots, boxes, counting in a back room, the usual ritual that's supposed to feel democratic. Then the union president, Dominic Caruso, walked out and announced the strike authorization failed. Numbers that didn't fit the mood in the room, numbers that didn't fit what men had been saying for weeks. Frank didn't shout. He didn't flip tables. He watched Dom's face and felt something turn cold inside him because Frank had seen lies before. Foremen lying about safety, managers lying about injuries, companies lying about temporary cuts. This lie was different. This one came from inside the union. That night, Frank called people he trusted and asked one question: "How did you vote?" Again and again he heard the same answer: yes, yes, yes. Not one no. The math didn't work, which meant either Frank had somehow only called the most loyal men on earth, or the vote had been rigged. And once Frank accepted that possibility, the story stopped being about wages and became about betrayal. Frank didn't go to the newspapers first. He didn't go to the police. He went to the union president. Then he went to the company superintendent. And what he found wasn't shame or denial. It was confidence. The kind of calm you only have when you believe the system will protect you. When Frank pushed, the response wasn't "let's recount." It was pressure, threats, subtle reminders that his son had just been hired, that jobs could disappear, that reputations could be destroyed, that the mill could keep running with one less man causing problems. Frank went home and sat in the dark kitchen, thinking about his grandfather's death, his father's sickness, his own burned hands. 3 generations traded to the furnaces. And now, the one institution built to protect workers had apparently been rented out for cash. 12 men, vote counters, poll watchers, fixers, and middlemen, had sold 4,000 steelworkers out like scrap. By Friday night, Frank had a list. Not suspects, not maybe. A list that felt true because the pattern made sense. Men with medical bills, men with gambling debt, men with sick kids, men who needed just enough money to rationalize a crime. A payoff divided into portions small enough to hide, big enough to tempt. Frank didn't want to kill anyone. At least that's what he told himself. He wanted confessions. He wanted the vote reversed. He wanted the union cleaned out like slag. But anger doesn't stay clean. It spreads. He brought in 2 allies, Bobby Sullivan, the kind of man who'd been dangerous since Vietnam and never tried to hide it, and Joe Bianchi, whose family carried old strike blood in its memory. They didn't talk like movie villains. They talked like exhausted men who'd watched the law fail too many times. They didn't say murder. They said consequences. They said send a message. They said we can't let this happen again. The plan was simple in the way desperate plans always are. A maintenance shed, isolated, unmonitored industrial noise outside to swallow sound. A fake meeting, names summoned one by one. Frank would talk first, give them a chance. If they confessed, they walked out. If they didn't, Frank didn't have to finish the sentence. The guns did that for him. But what happened inside that shed wasn't a confrontation anymore. It was a selection process. The first man walked in early, confused, still wearing work gloves. Then another, then a pair together. They saw the barrels and understood instantly that this wasn't union business. It was judgment. One tried to laugh it off. One started praying. One demanded proof. One blamed the company. One blamed poverty. One blamed Frank for acting like a saint while holding a gun like a criminal. And Frank listened, because that's what shop stewards do. They listen to men explain why they did what they did. Sick wife, disabled son, late mortgage, fear. They all had reasons, and the reasons sounded real because steel towns don't create villains, they create desperate people. But here's the part Frank couldn't escape, whether their reasons were tragic or selfish. They had still voted against 4,000 men with families. They had still taken money. They had still treated the union like a slot machine that could be cashed out. Frank offered them one final door: confess publicly, reverse the vote, return the money, take the punishment like men. And the answer, whether spoken or implied, was the same: we can't. If we confess, we lose our jobs. If we lose our jobs, we lose our families. If we lose our families, what was the point of doing any of this to begin with? That's when Frank realized the system had trapped everyone. The company trapped workers. The economy trapped the company. The union trapped itself. And the men in the shed weren't just betrayers, they were proof that hunger breaks solidarity faster than any boss ever could. But Frank also realized something else, something colder. If he let them walk, nothing changes. The vote stays stolen. The cuts go through. The union rots from the inside. And his son grows up in a world where the only lesson is, sell your brothers first or you'll be the one starving. So the first shot came, then the second. Then the shed turned into a place where words didn't matter anymore. 12 men were executed not like enemies but like traitors, one after another, in a methodical rhythm that sounded less like rage and more like procedure. Outside, the mill kept running. Steel kept pouring. The furnaces didn't pause to mourn. They never do. By the time anyone thought to check that maintenance shed, the bodies were already cooling on the concrete. 12 families, wives, children, parents, would get phone calls that didn't make sense. Men don't usually die at work unless something explodes, unless someone falls, unless the mill eats them. But this wasn't the mill. This was men doing it to men. Youngstown didn't know what to do with a massacre that wasn't crime in the usual way. This wasn't the mob. This wasn't random street violence. This was a union civil war. And the city had to look at itself in the mirror and admit the ugliest truth. The most dangerous thing in a dying town isn't the outsiders. It's what desperation can turn neighbors into. Frank Marino didn't run. He didn't flee the state. He went home, sat at the kitchen table and waited, because somewhere deep down he believed he'd done the only thing left that could be done. He believed he'd protected the future by destroying the present. That's how vengeance always sells itself.